You may think that when you come to a park, you're going to be communing with nature and seeing the natural spaces. And that would be true, but there are some times when you come to a park and you see places that are just devastated. Where I'm standing right now has been known for 20 years to be an illegal BMX bike park, and you're not allowed to dig here, you're not allowed to ride here. The Parks Bylaw 608 states that you can't ride bikes on places that aren't paved, and as you can clearly see, this area is not paved. In fact, this area is a ravine according to Parks Bylaw 658, and you're not allowed to do any alteration of the grade whatsoever. I'm standing on the highest point in this feature, and I'm on the eastern side of it. And what you need to understand about this place is that it actually wasn't here in the springtime. It's only been up for the summer. And if you were to look at it, it's eroded on either side because of the rains. But the weight of the sand in this feature is actually pushing backwards and down. And we've got erosion behind me, and that's actually increased since we've had the rains. Essentially, the only piece that's holding this together is the stump off to my right. When they come down the runs, when they hit this place, they come over it, and if they miss, they don't have a big landing spot, which makes this dangerous. To say nothing of the fact that to my right, you've actually got essentially a two-story drop to the bottom of this feature. Now, if that happens and somebody goes off the side because it collapses, somebody's going to get hurt. I'm here just below the highest point in this feature, and just beneath where I'm squatting or standing here, you can actually see the erosion of the side here. Now, the green patches are moss, and that's an indicator that the land is actually trying to rehabilitate itself. The moss will actually cause the water to run off and stop the erosion. The plants on the side have rooted here, and they're holding this hill together. But the reason this hill is actually collapsing is because of this feature behind me. The weight of the soil here is actually causing this to collapse, which eventually will take this whole ramp down. What we have here is evidence of illegal digging, and this shovel was just left as it was found. This is an indicator that despite the fencing and despite the enforcement of the space, those who want to use this as a bike park just aren't stopping. The unfortunate part of all this is the people who are doing the digging don't understand the damage that they're doing to this place. Because if you look at it, you can see how the water is going to flow based on where the leaves are around it. The other problem with this is that the natural elements, the creatures, the birds and whatnot, have no cover in this space, and therefore they pretty much abandon it for their use. The land, as we say, is trying to rehabilitate itself, but with stuff like this going on, we know that that's not going to happen. This area has also featured blue herons, it's featured downy woodpeckers. We found a golden eagle on the site. I've seen nuthatches, obviously as you can hear, the chickadees, cardinals, mourning doves. We've seen a kingfisher. There are cormorants in the pond to the south of us, and a pair of swans were also nesting right by the exit for the drainage for the pond in the springtime. The sad part is all these indicators, the creatures, the way the plants are growing, the way you see moss and indeed fungus, means that the land is actually trying to regrow itself. What we're seeing in the center of this shot is actually a fungus which is growing from wood that's been buried beneath the soil. This fungus is an example of how the land is trying to rehabilitate itself and shows that the ecosystem is actually still active. What will happen is that this fungus will break down the dirt mechanically and chemically so that bacteria and small worms can further break the dirt down. What will happen after that is that this organic mixture will allow plants to take root, further breaking the soil down, but ironically at the same time stabilizing it so this hill doesn't collapse. This is a natural process and we don't actually have to interfere with it. What we have here is a mushroom, and it's actually growing out of this rotting log, which is where it's pulling the nutrients from. And as it grows, its root system, which can be quite deep, is breaking the log down, which is creating more organic material down here. But behind it is another example of how the land is changing. We've got a shelf fungus right here growing out of this log. What these fungus are doing is they're causing this material, which is organic, to break down mechanically and chemically. And what's going to happen then is it's going to make all the nutrients available to the plants underneath here. We have an example of the cycle of nutrients here. We have an example of how the soil is actually active and living. This is a good sign to me because it means that the land itself is growing and it's alive. And why that gives me a good thought is simply because, despite the damage here, life goes on, you can't stop it, and eventually the area will be rehabilitated. These trees have very sensitive root systems, and if they get damaged by soil erosion or compaction, by people walking across the soil, their root systems, which are quite extensive, get smothered. The tree can't take in water, it can't take in nutrients, and because of that fungus in the ground, they can't live in a symbiotic relationship, and the tree will actually die. The other danger is erosion itself might just mechanically take the tree down because the soil gets washed away. These trees are known to be sensitive to the city according to its tree protection policy. With the bikers compacting the soil and digging the soil around the roots, and even worse, packing soil up around the trunks of the trees, they're actually endangering the trees, which are holding this site together. So when the trees go down, we have to wonder what's going to happen to the site. Which leads me to a final question that I'd like you to consider. When the BMX bikers have finished with this site, and they've caused the erosion, and the soil has washed out through the fence at the south end of this feature into the pond, will the BMX bikers be here to rehabilitate the soil and rebuild the land, or will they just go someplace else in the park like they've already threatened to do?